comes from Nate. Will the House do as Senator Jim DeMint has pleaded and pass a continuing resolution before the August recess to avoid the manufactured post-election crisis that we all know is coming? If not, why not?
I think the U.S. Senate has become simply an extension of the Obama re-election machine. And I think it's incumbent upon the House to actually do the responsible thing and pass at least a budget that gets us into next year. And I think that is something doable in the House. It's something doable before we get to the threatened shutdown that seems to be coming out of the Democrat side. I mean, when you have the head of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee threatening to use the Europe massive tax increases to crater the economy and use that as negotiating, that's the type of politics and gamesmanship that American businessmen and women certainly don't want, neither do the American people. So hopefully our House leadership can step up and do the responsible thing and extend the budget into next year so we can get past the silly season of campaigns and without doing serious damage to the economy.
Let's take a question here in the room. Yes, sir.
Sure, two quick questions. Do all of you...
And if you could state your name and affiliation.
Sorry, David Grant, Christian Science Monitor. Do all of you agree with that 1047 number, first? And second, how does this impact what happens with the sequester? If you pass this continuing resolution, obviously the sequester is still out there. And Jim DeMint has said, or sort of hinted that this would actually alleviate the need for a lame duck session at all if you've done the CR. So what happens then with the sequester?
Yes, Congressman Huelskamp, as far as the 1047, I certainly can live with that in order to avoid the disaster that would happen in a lame duck session. And this week, the House, of course, overwhelmingly passed requirement that the administration outline what they would do in sequestration. We've been awaiting on those numbers for months now. It's the administration's responsibility. And hopefully the fiscal cliff, I'm most concerned about the tax side of that. And the House later this month will pass an extension of the entirety of the Bush-Obama tax cuts. And that takes away most of the details in that would come up in the lame duck session. And certainly on January 3rd, we'd have the problem with sequestration. And I think we could put the 6 months budget, whatever we're looking for that CR would take care of that as well.
Question here in the room. Yes, the woman in the back.
If the CR only goes to December, what spending level would you support? If Speaker Boehner comes to you and asks you to support something only going to December, would you still support 1043 or 1047?
I will not support.
Let me just
CR.
repeat the question for our online viewers. If the funding only goes through December, what level of funding would you support in that case?
I will not support a CR that goes to December.
Do you feel, Mr. Labrador, do you feel many other conservatives would join you in that, in rejecting the CR?
I think most conservatives would, but I can only speak for myself. So,
I think as far as Congressman Huelskamp from Kansas, that if the Speaker would choose a 1047 6-month CR, that could pass the House with relative ease yet this month.
Next question on a different topic. What what actions do House conservatives want to take next when it comes to Obamacare?
Congressman Huelskamp from Kansas. I am a co-sponsor, lead sponsors Tom Price on HR 3000, which is a complete solution for moving towards a patient-centered healthcare system. We know we can't get there. We have to replace first. But I think it's incumbent upon Republicans to not simply talk about repeal, but talk about how we improve the system. There are significant conservative reforms that have been proposed in the House and passed in our budget 2 years in a row that would have significant impacts on the entire healthcare system. Number one being tort reform, Medicare reform, and I think we're going to continue to hear about those proposals. But this administration and the U.S. Senate today will make no reforms to the system. They are stuck on a massive government takeover through Obamacare, and we will not have any movement because of that. But they've got to be willing to compromise. But again, when they're in re-election mode for the president, they will refuse to even talk about any reforms that I think most Americans would support.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Okay, if we could just stay on healthcare for a minute or two. Matt Tobias with Politico, I cover healthcare for them. Will there be any more votes, do you think, this session, before November, on the healthcare reform, whether it's full repeal or trying to get at parts of it, and we kind of know what the labor age appropriations package has in terms of defunding. How do you see it legislatively for the rest of the year, the balance of the year?
The question, let me just repeat the question. The question is, will there be any votes for the remainder of the year when it comes to the healthcare law, whether it's through the appropriations process or other?
That would be best answered back at the Capitol, the Speaker's office.
There is a letter out with 127 signatures in reference to the defunding of Obamacare. And I think it's very important to House conservatives and Senate conservatives as well, that any budget that we would move forward, that it would address that issue about funding, at least through the House. And so that will come up, and hopefully the Senate and the House leadership will listen to conservatives. And again, 127 of us said no to funding, and that's within the House jurisdiction to do something about that. And we can't change the Supreme Court decision, but we can make certain that our tax dollars are not going to implementation.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask about the Farm Bill. A letter has been sent by a large bipartisan group, including many freshman Republicans, urging the Speaker to bring the bill to the House floor. I know Mr. Huelskamp voted against the bill in the committee. I don't know whether others of you are on the committee. Number one, would you like to see the bill on the floor? And secondly, if it happens, if it gets to the floor, what likely would be the outcome?
The question is, would you like to see the Farm Bill come to the floor? And if it does come to the floor, what would the outcome be?
I appreciate the question. I see the letter was sent to the Speaker and other leadership. I did not sign on to that letter. My concern, and I believe my colleagues were discussing that as I walked in, has to do with the 80% of the Farm Bill that has nothing to do with farming, and that's a nutrition title. We've had a 297% increase in food stamps/SNAP since the '02 Farm Bill. 297% increase, and for the Senate to offer $4 billion in cuts out of an $800 billion program, those weren't cuts. They were cuts in the rate of growth. The House actually passed some reforms in our budget packets. My amendment in the committee would have included those reforms in the House Farm Bill that came out of the committee. That was rejected in committee, and I think that's one of the problems. The leadership said, Republicans had a position on food stamps, and we can't cut a few 1% out of that, out of the rate of growth, and I think that's one of the holdbacks. And of course, the Speaker and others have concerns about numerous other aspects that I think harm our free market system. But if it comes to the floor, my promise will be I will offer the same amendment. The House has passed significant reforms that will direct our limited tax dollars to those who do qualify for food stamps. There is under no reason should we be given it to people who do not qualify. And those are the particular reforms that the House has passed already. And so I don't know what the leadership is going to do, but I know if it comes before, I will offer that same amendment. And the House position is very clear, and I think it makes sense. And I think the American people, after a 297% increase in food stamps/SNAP, they changed the name of that, it's out of control. And with 46 million Americans on food stamps, I think Americans say, hey, we're tired of the food stamp economy. We want an economy that's creating jobs.
I have a follow-up on that, if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
I talked to a couple of people who said they might be offering an amendment if it ever does come to the floor that would do just that, split the bill into one about nutrition and one about agriculture. Is that something that, if it got to the floor, that you guys would support?
The question is if you would support splitting the bill between agriculture and welfare.
Absolutely, I would support splitting the bill. I think it ought to be split.
I would too.
Yes.
Ben, I have not decided on that. Here's the difficulties conservatives have, and you each have a copy of the chart of the growth of 293%, I guess it is, in food stamps over the last decade. The problem for this is the small part of the farm bill, the farm side, that's discretionary, it's mandatory spending, but it expires. But the food stamp/SNAP is permanent law. If nothing passes this year, we're still going to have this massive increase in spending over the next 5 years compared to the last 5 years. We need to take the opportunity of the farm bill, if it comes to the floor, and pass common sense reforms that make certain that the monies we spend go to those that really are needy. And so dividing the question, I don't know if that gets us to that point in time. But the idea that the U.S. Senate can spend $1 trillion on the Farm Bill and then look us in the eye and say we made $4 billion in cuts to an $800 billion program, that's still going to grow by 22%. I mean, the American people, this is the type of Washingtonian politics and budget mechanisms that people say, hey, no, you're not cutting anything. You're simply cutting the rate of growth. And so if it comes to the floor, I relish an opportunity to talk about how we can improve and actually have welfare reform that works and actually helps those in need. And also, I would like to see, as we proposed in our RSC reform, some work requirements for food stamps. If you're an able-bodied adult, go out and help contribute to society. That worked in TANF, it should have worked on food stamps. Meanwhile, we have the administration trying to go the other way, trying to undo the Bill Clinton Republican Congress reforms that were tremendously helpful, not just saving money, but actually getting people back to work and being a useful, helpful member of society, which is supposedly is everybody's goal.
Yes. There's been some comment in the media about President Obama's recent statement that if you've got a business, you didn't build that, somebody else made that happen. And I wonder if you'd like to respond to President Obama and his view on that subject.
The question addresses President Obama's recent comments about who's responsible for creating business.
A couple of responses again. Congressman Huelskamp, my first thought of is, of course, the teleprompter will return to the Obama campaign after a comment like that. But it matches up with the infamous comment he made to Joe the plumber about spreading the wealth around. I mean, you take away the teleprompter, and he actually has to speak to 5th and 6th graders from his heart, and you begin to learn that the hope and change he promised has occurred, or the change has, and the American people have rejected it. But the Obama economy is in such sorry state, and I see no quick improvement with the current policies. But I did have a visit with a small businessman in Hutchinson, Kansas. His name was Mike. A couple things. One, he was laying, sleeping in his office, trying to get the business off the ground 30 years ago. There was no government employee sleeping in there with him. They weren't there helping him. He's building, he has 9 different retail stores, outlets now. But the other thing he mentioned as well is he says, Tim, I employ 48 people. And until Washington gets its act together, including replacing this president, I will not hire employee 4950. I refuse to submit to Obamacare on top of that. And but it's comments like that that really, by the president, actually really deflate the folks out there working hard every day and aren't creating jobs. It's not quick enough for the ones that are being lost. And again, I think he's reflected exactly what he thinks, which is certainly not the American dream.
I don't know if I got here a little late, but there was the markup yesterday in the Labor Committee on the healthcare, that subcommittee bill, and one of the major provisions of that is defunding the healthcare law. Many of you and some members of the Republican Study Committee have written to the Speaker saying, don't you dare put a bill on the floor that doesn't defund healthcare. You know operationally that's hard to do when we get to September 30th. Somebody has to cry uncle, or somebody has to really give in on one side, or that money stays in the bill, or we have a partial shutdown. What do you think is going to happen?
Congressman Huelskamp, that's a great question, and but I think it's also overshadowed by the major tax cliff that will be coming at the end of the year with the expiration of the Bush-Obama tax cuts. I mean, if that's in the debate, in the mix, we can take that up. But there is no underestimating, in my opinion, the economic impact, the loss in American jobs, the loss in confidence in the American economy that will occur if those tax rates signed into law by President Bush and signed into law again by President Obama are not extended for at least a year worth of time. We need that certainty. We need the certainty that the death tax is not going to climb to 55%. I mean, these are devastating issues, and Congress is kicking down the road the president and now Patty Murray has threatened. We're more than willing. The Senate Democrats are more than willing to crater the economy to get their way. It's that type of intransigence. I think the American people say we have enough, had enough of that, and the tax issues that asking the question. I mean, those are all could be part of the discussion. But the main thing, we've got to provide some certainty as soon as possible to American entrepreneurs.
one question related to the events that were taking place in the Middle East yesterday with Syria. If any of you had any thoughts on that and wanted to address a foreign policy issue, what's happening around the globe?
I did receive an email from an individual, Kansan, who was in the Golan Heights just yesterday as well. And it brings to mind that in the House have made some progress on that to protect, I think, the key ally largely in the Middle East of Israel. And so this is wide-ranging implications and something that hopefully we have a Secretary of State that's watching this. And but I think there's some concerns out there about the commitment of this administration to peace in that region.